look on your Father's Facebook.
Jacobs?
Yai, yai, da, dai, hi, yai, 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 hi, yai, yai, da, nai, yai, yai, hi, yai, dum, da, yo, hi, da, dai, hi, dam, do, dum, de. Hi, ya, da, da, ya, ya, da, da. Hi, ya, da, da, ya, ya. Hi, ya, ba, 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 ya, da, 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 da. Hi, ya, da, 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 ya, ya. Page 99, 61 or 2. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shehechezarta bi nishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shehechezarta bi nishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha. There's a video that's gone viral-ish, at least in our nerdy Jewish nigun music circles.
Viral for the Jews.
Viral for some Jews. Of several current Jewish music makers, including people who visited Beth Am before and performed, singing Oleg Zayin in beautiful 6 or 7 part harmony. And then they wrote a English rendition of it that was so evocative to me of the new beginnings we celebrate with Modeh Ani, even though I don't think they intended that. And the meter worked perfectly. And I said to Rabbi Schatz, we've got to do that. Because there's nothing better than continuing to appropriate other traditions, musical culture into liturgy. And it works. And when you slow it down, it almost sounds like a madrigal. And it's an appropriate way to begin a day. Now, when I've taught Modeh Ani in the past, and I've taught it many, many times, my favorite teaching on Modeh Ani is a teaching that I've shared over with this group many times, and that's Rabbi Lucas's teaching to remind us that this prayer has us begin our day not with Ani, I, but with Modeh, with gratitude. That's worthy every day, and it's certainly worthy today. But I want to linger on for a moment, is that This prayer appears every single day, which means you begin the day after a hard day with Modeh Ani. You begin the day after an exultant day with Modeh Ani. Whatever you dreamt, Modeh Ani. Whether you slept restfully or fitfully, Modeh Ani. Whether you're feeling joyful or depressed, Modeh Ani. Whether what you witness in the world is uplifting you or beating you down, Modeh Ani. And I can never fail to find wisdom in the rabbis admonishing us and reminding us that every day has to begin with this stance. And the reason why it's yet more appropriate for us to sing that tune to Old Lang Syne, because Old Lang Syne celebrates the new year, the January 1st, which we know is not a day that is significant on the Jewish calendar, but we're Americans and we live in this culture and we celebrate it in its own way, even though we also know that it was probably originally calendared that way because of a very famous bris. January 1st is a day to begin again, independent of how December 31st went. And this Shabbat is a day to pray and be together, independent or directly in response to how the previous week in this world was, whether the previous week was one which had us soaring or had us flailing. And there was a lot of flailing this week. Rabbi Schatz and I, weeks ago, when we started to think about the next, the calendar of upcoming Shabbatot, we thought, hey, how about this Shabbat, for no particular reason, instead of having the service go quickly, focusing on the Torah reading and then a long sermon or text study, why don't we linger for an hour plus on Psukei to Zimra and Shacharit with beautiful music, beautiful divrei tefillah and ideas, as a way of marinating in these texts and how we're supposed to begin our Jewish mornings. And then this week happened. And we decided primarily to keep that basic approach for a bunch of reasons. Number one, primarily, I firmly believe that a Jewish community comes together to pray and be in relationship with our received tradition and be inspired by Torah. And many, many different types of Jews with many, many different types of backgrounds come together in the same digital or real sanctuary to pray. And that's our primary purpose. And I believe that maintaining that purpose, even during and after a week of incredible drama and pain, is a proper holding up of what the Jewish spiritual experience ought to be. And we're also going to find places here and there to make sometimes oblique and sometimes more direct references to the week that was in America. But primarily for us, and we hope for you, at a Shabbat morning, we say Shabbat Shalom to you. It is a new day. It's a time to be inspired by and lifted by these words and these tunes we have received through the generations. And we're so delighted to share this morning with you, and we wish we could be doing it in person. So one more time, again, 99 in the Lev Shalom, 61 in the Slim Shalom, 2 in the Sim Shalom. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai bekayam shehechazarta bi nishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai bekayam shehechazarta bi nishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha. Next paragraph in the Lev Shalom, page 63 in the Slim Shalom, page 8 in the Sim Shalom. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. 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 Ata barata, ata yetzarta, ata nefachta bi. Ata barata, ata yetzarta, ata nefachta bi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Morning blessings, Birkot HaShachar. Please rise, page 103. Page 65 and page 10. Again, the page order I'll be announcing will be Lev Shalem, Slim Shalem, Slim Shalom, and the full volume Sim Shalom. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasachvivi lavchim ben yom uben laila. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shasani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam pokech ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam abisha rumim. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam atir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam raka aretz alamayim. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam hamichim mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shasa likot tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam asher yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam ater yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam hanotein layayev koach. Utenenu ayom u'chol yom l'chen l'chesed rachamim b'neicha v'neichoroenu v'tigmelenu chasadim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael. The next paragraph in the Lev Shalem on the top of 105, it's somewhere soon after that in the other prayer books. I don't have the exact page in front of me. We have two interesting lines I want to linger on for just a moment.
You may be seated.
You may be seated. You can stand if you want to stretch your legs, but you may be seated. People have heard me say before that some of my favorite material in the Siddur is either passed over extremely quickly or is recited when so few people in the room or both. And this page, this section, has several of my favorites. But I want to linger on just one of them. So hopefully if you're in the Lev Shalem, the top of 105, and nearby another Siddurim, Leolam Yehei Adam. Leolam, always, forever. Yehei Adam, a person should. Yirei Shamayim, have fear or awe of heaven. Baseter, both in private. Uva galui, and also in public, exposed. Umodeh al hamet, should always acknowledge that which is true. V'dover emet bilvavo. So, modeh al hamet, you should acknowledge what is true out there, publicly. V'dover emet bilvavo, and should speak truth in one's heart. V'yashkem, and should get up in the morning. V'yomar, and say the following thing. For now, I don't want to focus on the following thing, although that's interesting as well. I want to focus on what I think is at the core of those two lines. There are two ways of describing to me what those two lines are about. One is the notion that your outer presentations and your inner heart should match. That what you say when people are listening and what you think when people are not listening ought to match. That what you do when people are watching and what you do when no one's watching should match. as a human being, that's extremely hard. Extremely hard. You can go to obvious examples of you should not only not steal when no one is looking in the store. Hopefully everyone on this Zoom does not struggle to have to do that well. But there are many, many other places where the human condition really, really makes it hard to have there be 100% parallel between what happens when people are observing you and what happens when people are not. A subtle cousin to that is the notion of having your values and your principles that you stand by and that you articulate publicly be applied evenly and fairly. Because at the core, what I hear this text saying to me, and it's a challenge every single day, I take it as a sacred challenge. I'm still working on this, folks, is the type of integrity that is related to supreme intellectual honesty that I find in a terribly aching way utterly lacking in our society. The type of intellectual integrity that has you apply your values and your principles equally and evenly to those with whom you agree and to those with whom you disagree. It is very hard to hold back and respond to what we see in the world and be sure that we are responding based on values and not based on bias, based on principles and not based on groupthink. And I think there's a lot of brokenness about this in America, certainly in political discourse, certainly as we respond to headlines, and certainly as we try to imagine what our country and nation could be. So, this is one of those oblique references rather than direct references. I want us to say these words and have it be a challenge, not to someone else, that's easy, a challenge to you, that your heart matches your mouth, that your private actions match your public ones, and that your righteous articulation of your values and your principles are applied as evenly, as fairly, as honestly, and with as much integrity as possible. Because I think the spiritual person is required to do that. כי היא חום מעשינו טוב ומחיינו הבל לפניך מותר הדם מן הבהמה עין כי הכל הבל אבל אנחנו חייבים בידינו. השרינו מה טוב חלקנו מעיניים גורלנו מה יפה ירושתנו אשר שאנחנו משקיעים ערבים ערב ובוקר ויומרים פעמיים בכל יום שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. קדש את שמך מקדישי שמך וקדש את שמך בעולמך וישועתך תרים ותגביה קרננו ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש את שמך ברבים. We turn to page 109 in the Lev Shalem 70. For some reason I don't have a page number in the Sim Shalom for Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Ishmael Omer Bishlosh Esrei Nidon. דבר הלמד מעניינו ודבר הלמד מסופו וכן שני כתובים המחשים זה את זה שבו הכתוב השלישי והכריע ביניהם יהי רצון בפניך אלוהינו ולבתינו שתיתן חלקנו בתורתך ונהיה מתלמידיו של אהרון הכהן אוהב שלום ורודף שלום אוהב את הבריות ומקרבן לתורה. Page 120, page 81 or page 50 for Psalm 30.
מזמור שיר חנוכת הבית לדוד.
מזמור שיר חנוכת הבית לדוד.
Eilecha
Eilecha
Adonai Ekra
Adonai Ekra Adonai et Chana.
Eilecha
Adonai Ekra ve'el Adonai et Chanan. Shema Adonai v'choneini. Adonai heye ozer li.
Shema Adonai.
Shema Adonai v'choneini. Adonai yeye ozer li.
So this is a tune that we often sing during Psukei de Zimra, and it stuck out to me not only for the tune that is evocative of bringing community together, but because of really a similar trope to what Rabbi Kligfeld just spoke about, which is that if you look at the words, if you look at the translation of this verse, we only see one name for God, the Tetragrammaton, Yud, He, Vav, He. But if you listen to the words, you might think that you're actually hearing three names for God. Adonai, Yud, He, Vav, He. Adonai, which is translated as master by our rabbis and by our Sidurim. And then El, which is not used here as God's name, but rather to. So the translation that we see is, to you, Adonai, I call, and to my master I plead. Hear Adonai and be gracious to me. Adonai will be my helper. But if we just listen, if we don't look at the words and we just listen to the words, and I'm going to suggest that you either close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or just think deeply while we sing it another time. There are three different ways that we can approach God, three different names for God. And to me, that as a prayer means to me that I can come to prayer as all different versions of myself. I can be a seeker, I can be a doubter, I can be happy, I can be sad, I can be present, I can be distracted, I can be all different versions of myself, because what this line says is that we call out to God. And if we are able to call out to God as all different versions of ourselves, then maybe our prayers get to be heard whenever we're feeling, however we're feeling, and by whichever version of ourself is doing that feeling. We have multiple parts of who we are, and when we ask for that partnership with God, we plea and we ask to be listened to by multiple facets of God. So as we sing this one more time, I suggest to you, again, if you're comfortable doing so, closing your eyes so that you're not looking at the words. And just thinking deeply about which versions of yourself are you bringing to prayer this morning. Eilecha,
Eilecha,
Adonai ekra,
ve'el Adonai et Chanan.
Eilecha,
Adonai ekra, ve'el Adonai et Chanan.
Shema Adonai,
Shema Adonai v'choneini. Adonai yeye ozer li.
Shema Adonai,
Shema Adonai v'choneini. Adonai heye ozer li.
Le'eman yizamecha kavod v'lo yidom, Adonai Elohai le'olam odeka. Mourner's Kaddish, page.
121,
Thank you.
82, or 52.
Thank you. Yit gadal ve'yit kadash shemei rabba.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach kirtei ve'amlich malchutei. Bechayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Israel. Ba'agala uv'izman kariv ve'imru. Amen. Yehi shemei rabba mevarach le'olam le'omei omaya. Yit barach ve'yish tabach ve'yit pa'ar ve'yit ramam ve'yit naseh ve'yit hadar ve'yit aleh ve'yit halal shemei dekudesha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma ve'imru amen.
Amen.
Yehi shalama rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'imromav Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen.
Amen.
Baruch she'amar, page 122. Rabbi Kligfeld, I'll let you lead since you are standing.
122, 83, or 54. Baruch Shamar V'Yaolam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Hoseh Rishi, Baruch Homer V'Yosef, Baruch Hoseh Kem, Baruch Merachem Al Aretz, Baruch Merachem Al Abrot Mek Shalem Zechot. Yachid Chei Olamim, Melech Meshubach Umfarder Shemo Agadol, Baruch Atah Adonai, Melech Mehulal Batishbachot. May be seated, and we turn ahead to page 127, or 87 or 60. I don't know, about 9 lines down, the word Torah. Some of you will, or Torah, will recognize the significance of these words, at least for the space in which I am seated, because the Aron HaKodesh, not seated, standing, the Aron HaKodesh that used to be right over there had on the, as a design, the verses Torah Adonai Temima, and then Edut Adonai Nemana, and Psukei Adonai Yesharim, and Mitzvat Adonai Bara, and Yirat Adonai Tehorah. We always thought it was interesting that the way the doors were set up is that when you open the doors to the ark, you actually divided God's name because it was Torah and then Yud Yud Temima. So we divided God's name every time we opened up the doors of the ark. But these were words that were very significant to Rabbi Pressman and the design team that put together that Aron HaKodesh. And here's a tune for Torah Adonai Temima, which means that the Torah of God is pure. Meshivat Nafesh, it restores the soul. Edut Adonai Nemana, the testimony that God has given is faithful, believable. Machkimat Peti, brings wisdom even to the simple. Torah Adonai Temima. Torah Adonai Temima. Torah Adonai Temima, Meshivat Nafesh. Torah Adonai Temima. Torah Adonai Temima. Torah Adonai Temima, Meshivat Nafesh. Edut Adonai Nemana, Machkimat, Machkimat Peti. Edut Adonai Nemana, Machkimat, Machkimat Peti. Yehi l'ratzon refi v'gon lebi lefanech Adonai tzuri v'go ali. Next page, Psalm 34. This is an acrostic. We'll pick up at the mem line. I want to say something about, just briefly about the tune that I'm going to use it to. So I am very much a Jewish chameleon. I've had so many different religious influences in my life. Some of you know some of this. I don't know if all of you know all of it. My father's father was a Reform rabbi who was ordained at the non-denominational Jewish Institute of Religion before it fused with Hebrew Union College in the 1930s or 40s. He served both conservative synagogue first and then Reform synagogues. My father, his son, really identified with the Reconstructionist movement and was a student of Mordechai Kaplan's. We were Zionists first and then became members of a conservative synagogue in Connecticut. My mother came from kind of an ethnically identified but not religiously identified Jewish community, but her parents still belonged to an Orthodox synagogue in New York. I went to Camp Young Judea, which is a Zionist camp, before going to Camp Ramah Conservative Movement camp. I was involved in USY, the Conservative Movement's youth group, and then I spent a semester at an Orthodox yeshiva. And all of those influences impacted the way I think as a Jew and the way I sing as a Jew, because it's true that music sounds different from different Jewish sources. And so I spent 4 months at an Orthodox yeshiva when I was in college, and I don't know, 15, 20, 25 of the songs that live in my head that are part of my Jewish musical repertoire are from that time, including
Which everyone just thinks you wrote.
What's that?
Which everyone just thinks you wrote.
Yeah, that was the Havdalah tune that we did at Yeshivat HaMivtar in 1994. The tune we just sang, Torah Hashem Tamima, I learned then, and this tune, To Mi Ha'ish, it's the only place I ever heard it. So I learned it and I loved it. I've never, I think as far as I know, heard it sung in another setting. So I don't know where it came from. I wish I could give you the composer's name, but I can't. But the words are evocative no matter when you read it, and what it means to be someone who desires life, hechafetz chaim, ohev yamim, to love all the days. It's hard to love all the days. Lirot tov, seeing good in them. That's a particular wonderful and important challenge this week. Mi ha'ish hechafetz chaim, ohev yamim lirot tov. 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 Netzor, netzor, leshoncha meira, usefatecha, midaber mir, masur meira, vaseto, bakesh shalom verod fehu. Netzor, netzor, leshoncha meira, usefatecha, midaber mir, masur meira, vaseto, bakesh shalom verod fehu. Bakesh shalom verod fehu. Temotet rasha ra'av, v'sonei tzadik yesham, u'poder nefesh avadav, v'lo yashmu kol achosim bo. Please turn to page 132, page 92, or page 72, and please rise for Hallel Hagadol, the great Hallel. And I want to say that I know it's not practical week in, week out, but this is the pace through which Psukei de Zimra should be prayed. And we're not even saying every word, but this is the proper pace. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki leolam chasto, hodu, hodu le'elohei ha'elohim, ki leolam chasto, hodu, hodu l'Adonai ha'adonim, ki leolam chasto, hodu, hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki leolam chasto. Shebeshifleinu zachar lanu ki leolam chasto vayifrekeinu mitzareinu ki leolam chasto hainoten lechem lechol basar ki leolam chasto hodu li'el hashamayim ki leolam chasto. May be seated. We turn to the Psalm for Shabbat, Psalm 92 on page 134 and around page 94 or 75. I don't have the exact page in the other Siddurim.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת.
מה גדלו?
מה רבו? One of the best things about doing Psukei de Zimra this way, literally this way, with Rabbi Kligfeld in the sanctuary and me in the ballroom, is that we get to sing tunes in harmony that often either of us are singing alone and watching you sing with us. But being able to sing together is really just a remarkable thing, and we talk about it every time we do it, but it continues to be remarkable. And we're going to sing two pieces on this page. We're going to sing Tzadik Katamar and the following psalm, Psalm 93. Yesterday, when leading Kabbalat Shabbat, one of the things that was really missing for me was hearing other voices. This was a week where all I wanted to do was sing with other people, especially at the end of it. And so these were two psalms that I didn't get to sing yesterday with other people, and I'm sure you all also didn't get to sing with other people. And so I'm going to take the advantage of having Rabbi Kligfeld in the room with me, able to sing in harmony, so that we can sing both of these psalms together with you and hear all of our voices for this psalm for Shabbat at the end of such a divided week, to bring those harmonies together to hopefully make for a more peaceful and unified week. Tzadik Tamar Yifrach Keres Balbanon Iskeh Shetu בבית אדוני, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו. עוד ינובון בשיבה, דשנים ורעננים יהיו. כי ישר אדוני צורי, ולא עלתה בו. אדוני מלך, גאות לבש אדוני, עושית זר, אהבתי קון, תבל בל תימות, נכון כיסך מאז מעולם אתה. נשאו נערות אדוני, נשאו נערות קולם, יישאו נערות דוח ים, מקולות מים רבים אדירים, משברי ים אדיר במרום אדוני. עדותיך נאמנו מאוד, לביתך נא בקודש אדוני לאורך ימים. ידעי הנני הנני
Ashrei, page 136, 96, or 81.
We're going to focus for a moment on the line that starts with the word karov. Another acrostic. Didn't realize we were doing 2 acrostics today. And what's interesting about this line is that it says, close is God to all, or for all, who call out, to all that call out to God in truth. And it comes 2 lines after we say the words, excuse me, poteach et yadecha. Open up your hand and satisfy, or fill up, all that lives with contentment. The opening of the hand comes before the calling out. And to me, That implies that the poteach et yadecha is not only God's hand, but our own hand, which is why sometimes you'll see people literally open their hands while they say this line to remind them that it's their hands that need to be opened up. We need to open up our hands and give to those who need to be filled up with sustenance, whether that means food or water, or safety, or healing, or love, or Torah. Whatever needs to be fulfilled, that's on us, on humans, to open up our hands and to give to them. But then God comes close. Karov Adonai lechol korav. To those who call out and those who have helped the crying voices. God comes to those who cry out and to those who helped the crying out. But if we don't open our hands, how can we expect God or anyone to draw us in and help us find that wholeness and that true satiation? This is a tune that many of you probably will not know, and so I hope you'll learn with me. It's written by Batya Levine, and it focuses just on this one line, karov. And then there's a nigun that goes with it, and the nigun is difficult, so if you can catch on to it, beautiful, and if not, you can just listen and Yain and I along with your own tune. But think about the ways that you're both opening up your hands to others and allowing yourself to be brought close. Karov Adonai lechol korav lechol asher yikra'u v'emer. One more time. Karov Adonai lechol korav lechol asher yikra'u v'emer. Ayam bararira, barira, ayam barira. Oh, ayam bararira, ayam bararira, ayam bararira, yo. Ayam bararira, dira, 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 yo. Ayam bararira, dira, dira, ya, ya, ra, 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 ya, ya, yo. Ya, ra, dira, yo. Ay, yo. Ya, ra, ra, ya, ra, ra, ya, ra, yo. Ya, ra, dira, yo. Ay, yo. Ay, yo. Ay, yo, ba. Ay, yo. Karov Adonai lechol korav lechol asher yikra'u v'emet. Tehillah Adonai darapi v'yivracha v'asashem koshel elam v'ed v'anachnu nevarech ya me'ata ve'ad olam. Hallelujah. Page 137, or the next page in your Siddur. Hallelujah. Halinafshi Adonai, Adonai Mechayev, Zamalala Yabidi, Otichun Yabidi.
Al tiftachu v'nadivim b'nadamshin l'tshua.
Adonai Shomeret Kirim Yatom
Almana Yehudet v'derech reshaim yehaveit Yimloch Adonai le'olam Elohai Tzion ledor vador Hallelujah 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 Hallelujah. Turn to page 138 or around 98 or 85 in the others two Sidurim. We're looking for Psalm 147. I was at a rabbinic conference about a decade ago, maybe more than a decade, where the evening session, which the conference was Torah study and text study during the day, professional workshops in the afternoon, and the evening, kind of more psycho-spiritual, intimate sessions. And the organizing principle of this one was that each member in this small subgroup was supposed to bring a piece of liturgy that was their favorite, the one that spoke to them the most, that opened them up the most, and then we were going to explore it with each other. And so one of my colleagues, Rabbi Jack Moline, whom I love dearly, said that to him the most significant line of the liturgy was what you'll see as the fourth line down in Psalm 147, Moneh mispar lakochavim lechulam shemot yikra. God who counts the number of the stars and to all of them gives a name. And I, at this point, a good decade into my rabbinate and a good 30 years into my being a regular praying Jew, said to Jack, I've never heard that line. Where's that from? He says, Adam, it's in Psukei Zimra. You say it every single day. It was such an amazing reminder of what does happen when you move through things so quickly. It's not that I couldn't remember where it was. I had no conception of ever having said that sentence, even though I had said it most days of my adult life. So I want to say two things about that. Number one, slow down. There is so much preciousness in our texts, but we're not even aware. You're probably not even aware of some of the syllables and sounds and certainly the meanings of words you've been praying for years. And that really undermines what the experience of prayer ought to be. Number two, I am driven by this principle, and I hope that you in this community feel this way, that no matter how many stars there are in the celestial sky, or how many faces there are on a Zoom, or how many people there are to care for in the community, that everyone feels that they are known by name and known by personal attributes and are cared for individually by us. That is certainly our goal and our intention. If we ever fail at that, please call us on it, because it's our spiritual obligation. Rabbi Schatz?
Oh, I didn't know if you were done. Sorry. I was so taken with your words, I didn't realize you were done. Okay, we're going to actually begin this tune with the line right before Harofeh Lishvorei Lev, and it goes like this. Harofeh Lishvorei Lev Umchabesh le'atzvotam Moneh mispar lakochavim Lechulam shemot yikra Harofeh lishvorei lev Umechabesh la'atzvotam Moneh mispar lakochavim Lechulam shemot yikra. Hallelujah. 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 One more time. Hallelujah.
Mahagid Rav Liakol, Chukav Mishpatav Yisrael, O Asachin L'chol Goy, Umishpatim Ba'yida'um Alleluia. Page 141, page 100, or page 88.
We're just going to sing the line Kol HaNeshama to Hallelujah. And I was thinking back to when I used to go to Camp Ramah in Ojai. We used to have hand symbols, or I don't know what you would call them, but things we would do with our hands so that you would know which instruments we were singing about, so that the kids would know and learn both what they were saying and also the tune that went with it. So, there was a violin and cymbals. And then when we would get to Kol HaNeshama, the kids would put their hands over their mouths. Now, if you look at the words Kol HaNeshama, it means all of the souls, or every soul, or every breath. But what it sounds like is Kol HaNeshama, the voice of your soul. And I had never thought about that until I looked at it for this service, that we were teaching the kids to put their hands over their mouths, not for what the psalm actually says, but for what we wanted them to feel they could do, that they could use their voice, that they could use all of their soul and all of their might to pray to God. And so as we sing this tune, I hope that you feel you're doing it with all of your soul, but that you can do it also with all of your voice. And that you can sing out. Even if you're alone in your room, to sing out fills us up with joy. It fills us with being able to hear us sing these words out loud, to be able to know that we too are part of these prayers, part of all of the neshamot, all of the souls that are praising God. Kol ha-neshama te-hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama te-hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama te-hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama te-hallelujah, hallelujah.
Page 143, page 102, or page 92, please rise. Az yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael tashiraz Adonai v'amru le'mor asher ki ga'oga sus v'rachvo rama v'yam hozi v'zimrat yah v'yehi li lishua hozi v'zimrat yah v'yehi li lishua hozi v'zimrat yah v'yehi li lishua hozi v'zimrat yah v'yehi li lishua. Zelim ve'yo harim momenu. Ki l'Adonai amluch hamasha bagoyim alu moshim bi'artzion l'shpotet haraisa v'aytal l'Adonai amlucha v'yadonai l'melech al kol haaretz bayom hahu Yadonai echad u'shemo echad. We are seated for Nishmat 145, 104, or 334. Nishmat kol chai Tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu nishmat kol chai Tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Hananai hayo hayai dadai Hanai hayo hayai Hanai dadai hayai yo hayai dadai Hadai yo hayai Hanai nai hayai Ilufinu malei shirakayam. V'yaritzu yakdishu amlichu Hashem chamakenu ki lecho pe'alacha yodeh v'chol Hashem lecha tishava v'chol b'ro. Towards the end of that extended prayer. Kol atzmotai tomarna Adonai micha mocha matziloni mechazak mimenu ve'ani ve'yevyon migozelo Hananai Hanai Bahu Many of you know that I'm a biker, and some days when the sun is just right, and the wind is just right, and the road is just flat, and the temperature is just perfect, my biking friends turn to one another and say, if the conditions were just like this, we could just go on forever. Like 30 miles, 60 miles, 100 miles, it's just nothing. This could keep going. And that's how I feel when I'm doing this kind of singing with you, Rabbi Schatz, and with all of you, that I wish we could do 5 hours of Psukei de Zimra because It just nourishes the soul, and so beautiful to be able to do it with harmony. But alas, at some point, even an elongated Psukei de Zimra has to come to an end, and we got to get to Shachrit and Torah service. So here we go. But just so you know, in case you think we're going over, this is exactly the time frame we had in mind. Mi hidvelach umi yishvelach umi aroch lach el hagedol hagibor v'yanora el elyon koneh shamayim ba'aretz nalal chana shabechacha ונפאר חנברך את שם קודשך כאמור לדוד ברכי נפשי את אדוני בכל קרבי את שם קודשו האל בתעצומות עוזך הגדול בכבוד שמך הגיבור לנצח והנורא בנורותיך המלך היושב על כיסא רם ונישא. This tune to Shochenad we're going to sing, which was composed by Joey Weisenberg, begins with the two lines after Shochenad, and then it goes back to Shochenad. So it begins with Befi Yesharim. It's on page 147 or 105 or 336. Befi Yesharim Titalal, titalal, uvdivrei tzadikim, titbarach, titbarach, shochenad maharom, vekadosh shemo, shochenad maharom, vekadosh shemo, uvilshon chasidim, titromam, titromam, uvekerev kedoshim, titkadash, titkadash, shochenad maharom, vekadosh shemo, shochenad maharom, vekadosh shemo, laisharim navati lavavam. Uvmakalot rivavot amchabed Yisrael beri night bar shimcha makeinu b'chol dor vador sheken chovat kol hayetzurim lefanech Eloheinu v'Elokei avoteinu lehodot le'alel l'shabeach lefa'er l'romem l'adei l'varech l'leil kales al kol divrei shirot v'tishbecho David ben Yishai avdecha meshichecha. Please rise. Yishtabah shimcha la'ad malkeinu el machad l'bakar l'barkilach. Brachot ve'odaot me'ata v'yad olam baruch ata Adonai el melech gadol batishbachot el ha'odaot Adon haniflaot habocher b'shirei zimra melech elchei ha'olamim. We skipped the Chatzi Kaddish and the Bahu. So we're about to begin the first blessing after the Bahu, which is on page 150 or 107 or 340. You may be seated, but before we say those lines, we try very much at Bet Tham to honor the halachic principle that we don't pause or interrupt in between the Bahu and the Amidah, even for Iyunei Tefillah, even for little closer looks into the davening. So I want to point out something now in advance, and hopefully it will be with you as you're reciting those words. So turn to page 153 for a moment. 153, and in the other Sidurim, like 110 or 345, the phrases that begin Kulam Ahuvim. At that same rabbinic conference that I mentioned before, where one of my colleagues mentioned the line of Monem Mispar Lekochavim Lechulam Shemot Yikra, that his favorite line of liturgy was that God counts all the stars and gives them all names. Another one of the people in that evening session, who just happened to be the chancellor of JTS, Professor Arnie Eisen, who was in that evening session as a participant, not as a teacher, he said that these lines in davening, which we read every morning and every Shabbat morning and every Yontif morning, were his favorite, and the ones that challenged him and inspired him the most. Why? I also had read these lines hundreds, thousands of times and never really asked myself what was going on. We are in kind of a version of a Kedusha within the Shacharit service, and we're imagining the angels davening. It's an angelological moment, and Rick Muller's head should be shaking because he's all over this stuff. We're imagining the angels who have a minyan up there. And how are we describing these angels? Kulam ahuvim, they're all beloved. Kulam birurim, they're all pure and clean. Kulam giborim, they're all heroes. V'chulam osim be'ema, and all of them perform be'ema with awe, uviyira, and fear, ritzon konam, the will of their creator. V'chulam pochim epihem b'kedushat Torah, all of them open up their mouths with holiness and purity and song, and they bless God's name. And then in the next paragraph, he says this is what the part that even means more to him. V'chulam mekablim alehem, all of them take it upon themselves, all the yoke, malchut of the kingdom, shamayim of heavens, zemizeh. What does zemizeh mean? From one another. It's such an interesting phrasing. The angels put upon them the yoke of heaven, but from one another, interacting with one another, engage with one another. V'notnim reshut zelazeh, and they give permission to one another. Lahakdish liotzram, to give sanctity to their Creator. Benachat ruach, with a pleasant, gentle spirit. Professor Eisen said, this is not the natural way you would imagine a group of people in a spiritual pose. A group of people in a spiritual pose might be individually interested in their relationship with the Creator and might be jockeying for position. Look who's holier. Look who's more humble. Look who's more penitent. The angels model for us a way of being spiritual where our relationship with God is dependent on how we consider the person to our left and our right. And I mean that in all ways. And unless we are seeing the other as ahuv, beloved, seeing the other as barur, pure, seeing the other as gibor, as having some heroism in them, and unless we are receiving the yoke of heaven through one another and giving permission to one another to be a part of this holy minyan, it ain't no minyan. It certainly ain't no celestial minyan. And so what the chancellor was talking about was how challenging it is for all minyanim to see one another as the text rhapsodizes about how the angels see one another. My friends, it is harder and harder to see everyone around us as having some heroism in them, and harder to find something beloved about the people with whom we disagree. And we must, if we're going to aspire to the angels. We must, if we're going to create a truly sanctified minyan. Let that be in our hearts as we begin the brachot of the Shacharit service back on 150, 107, or 340. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or uvorei choshech ohoseh shalom uvorei et hakol hakol yiducha v'hakol yishevchu v'hakol gamru. Ein ke'erkach Adonai Eloheinu ba'olam hazeh v'yein zulatach malkeinu l'chayei olam haba. Efes b'iltecha go'aleinu limot hamashiach v'yein domeh lecha moshienu letchiyat hametim. El Adon al kol hamasim baruch umborach befi kol neshama godlo v'tuvo malei olam da'at u'tvuna sovevi moto hamitgaeh al chayot hakodesh v'nedar bechavod al hamerkava zechut umishor lifnei chiso chesed verachamim lifnei kevodo tovim yom Shabbat Eloheinu. Shevach notnim lo kol tzeva maraharom tiferet ugedula srafim ve'ofanim ve'chayot hakodesh לילה של שבע מכל המעשים ויום השביעי אליו ישע כל העולם. תתברך מושיענו על שבח מעשה ביד מאורי אור שעשית, יפרוך הסלע, תתברך צורנו מקינו וגואלנו. כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים בימה ובירא רצון קונם, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה וטהרה, בשירה ובזמרה, ומברכים ומשבחים ומפארים, ומעריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שם האל המלך הגדול הגיבור והמשהו, וכולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ורע ונימה, קדושה כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה, קדוש קדוש קדוש, אדוני צבאות מלך הארץ כבודו, באופנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מנשאים לעומת צרפים, לעומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו ליל, ברוך נמות איתנו למלך אל חי וקיים. כאמור ליוסרים גדולים כולם, חסדו אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה ליאורו ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות, אהבה רבה אהבתנו אדוני אלוהינו חמד אדוני חמד. במירתך בתורתך ודברי ליבנו במצוותיך, במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו, לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד. ואבינו לשלום יבא כנפות הארץ, ותלכנו כמיעוט לארצנו. כי אל פה ישועת אתה בנו בחרת מכולם בלשון וקרבתנו. שלך גדול סלע באמת, להודות לך ליחדך באהבה ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. אל מלך נאמן, שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אמת ויציב נחם וקיים. לדור ודור קיים ושמו קיים, בכיסו נכון ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת, לא רב חיים וקיימים. אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו, פודנו מצילנו מעולם, שמך אין אלוהים זולתך, עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם, מגן ומושיע לבניהם, אחריהם בכל דור ודור. אמת אתה הוא אדוני. אתה הוא ראשון, ואתה הוא אחרון, ומבלעדיך אין לנו. אתה הוא ראשון, ואתה הוא אחרון, ומבלעדיך אין לנו מלך, אין לנו גואל ומושיע. Tehilot Lehel Elyon Baruch Borach Moshe v'nei Yisrael Hanu Shira Besimcha Rabba V'yamru Chulam Mi Chamocha V'Helim Adonai Mi Kamocha Nedar B'Kodesh Nora Tehilot Sefer Shira Chadasha Shibchu Geulim Leheshimcha Al Sefat Hayam Yachad Kulam Hodu V'Himlichu V'Yameru Adonai Imloch Leolam Vohed Tzur Yisrael Kuma B'Ezrat Yisrael Ufteichenu Mecha Yuda B'Yisrael Go Aleinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch Ata Adonai Gal Yisrael. Anai, anai, ai, oh, ay, 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 oh. So we spent 90, what I hope you'll agree with us is beautiful, glorious, rich minutes doing Psukei de Zimra and Shacharit. We now move to the Torah service, and just to again give you a heads up, we'll hear the 7 Aliyot without the Aliyot. Debbie Mishek and Johnny Powell will do the laning for us. Isaac Budai is going to chant the Haftarah. In the middle, we'll do a Misha Berach. At the end, we'll bless the upcoming month of Shvat. And then at the end of that, I'll share my last portion of words that I'm going to share with you today, which will be related to the Parsha, kind of an extended version of the Shabbat video, but with different stuff in it that I sent out yesterday. So without further, and then we'll see if we have time for Musaf, or we might invite people to do Musaf on their own. Rabbi Schatz, I don't have the Luach in front of me, so can you announce the page numbers for the triennial?
Yes, happy to. So we will be beginning on page 326 if you're in the Eitz Chaim. If you're in regular Chumash or any kind of Bible, we're starting Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. And Debbie can be unmuted and spotlit so that she can start reading for us. It says Debbie and Steve Mishik. Maybe that's helpful. There we go. Great.
ומשה היה רואה את צאן יתרו חותנו כהן מדיין, וינהג את הצאן אחר המדבר, ויבוא אל הר אלוהים ערבה, וירא מלך אדוני אליו בלבת אש מתוך הסנה ביער, והנה הסנה בועט באש, והסנה איננו אוכל. ויאמר משה אסורה נא ואראה את המראה הגדול הזה, מדוע לא יבער הסנה? וירא אדוני כי שר לראות, ויקרא אליו אלוהים מתוך הסנה, ויאמר משה משה, ויאמר הנני, ויאמר אל תקרא הבלום של נעליך מעל רגליך, כי המקום אשר אתה עומד עליו אדמת קודש הוא. ויאמר אנוכי אלוהי אביך, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב. ויסתר משה פניו כי ירא מהביט אל האלוהים.
Aliyah, the second Aliyah can be found in the 7th verse, page 328.
ויאמר אדוני ראיתי את עני עמי אשר במצרים, ואת צעקתם שמעתי מפני נוגסיו, כי ידעתי את מכאוביו, וארד להצילו מיד מצרים, וכלותו מן הארץ ההיא אל ארץ טובה ורחבה, אל ארץ זבת חלב ודבש, אל מקום הכנעני והחיתי והאמורי והפריזי והחיבי והיבוסי. ועתה הנה צעקת בני ישראל באה אלי, וגם ראיתי את הלחץ אשר מצרים לוחצים אותם, ועתה לך ואשלחך אל פרעה, והוציא את עמי בני ישראל ממצרים.
Third Aliyah, verse 11.
ויאמר משה אל האלוהים, מי אנוכי? כי אלך אל פרעה, וכי אוציא את בני ישראל ממצרים. ויאמר כי אחיה עמך וזה לך אות כי אנוכי שלחתיך והוציאך את העם ממצרים תעבדון את האלוהים ההר הזה. ויאמר משה אל האלוהים הנה אנוכי בא אל בני ישראל ואמרתי להם אלוהי אבותיכם שלחני אליכם ואמרו לי מה שמו מה אומר עליהם. ויאמר אלוהים אל משה אחיה אשר אחיה ויאמר כה תאמר לבני ישראל אחיה שלחני אליכם. ויאמר עוד אלוהים אל משה כה תאמר אל בני ישראל אדוני אלוהי אבותיכם אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק אלוהי יעקב שלחני עליכם. זה שמי לעולם וזה זכרי לדור דור.
Fourth Aliyah, page 331 or verse 16.
לך ואספת את זקני ישראל ואמרת לכם אדוני אלוהי אבותיכם נראה אלי אלוהי אברהם יצחק ויעקב לאמור פקוד פקדתי אתכם ואת העשו לכם במצרים ואומר אעלה אתכם מעני מצרים אל ארץ הכנעני והחיתי והאמורי והפריזי והחיבי והיבוסי אל ארץ זבת חלב ודבש ושמעו לקולך ובאת וזקני ישראל אל מלך מצרים ואמרתם אליו אדוני אלוהי העברים נקרא אלינו ואתה נלחנה דרך 3 ימים במדבר ונזבחה לאדוני אלוהינו. ואני ידעתי כי לא ייתן אתכם מלך מצרים להלוך ולא ביד הזכה. ושלחתי את ידי והכיתי את מצרים בכל נפלאותיי אשר אעשה בקרבו. ואחרי כן ישלח אתכם ונתתי אתכם העם הזה בעיני מצרים והיה כי תלכו לא תלכו ריקם. ושאלה אישה משכנתה ומגרת ביתה כלי כסף וכלי זהב ושמלות ושמתם על בניכם ועל בנותיכם וניצלתם את מצרים.
Yasher Koach. Debbie will pause now for a Misha Berach, and then we will continue with Johnny leading us in the 5th through 7th Aliyot.
So I'll begin the Misha Berach prayer. I'll pause and recite the list for our congregation, then I'll pause again so that all of you who are here can, or with us, can add in names that you're thinking of as well. Misha Berach Abateinu Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov Imotenu Sarivka Rachel v'Leah V'Yibarech v'Yirapeh kol hacholim v'kol hacholot b'kila k'tosha hazot et Zahafa Yafa bat Esther v'et Rivka bat Peshia v'et Leah Friedel bat Bracha Kreinel v'et Catherine bat Sarah v'et Stanley Greitzer v'et Leah bat Freya v'et Harav Yaakov Baruch ben Uri v'Chava v'et Yosef v'Nachem Mendel ben Gittel v'et Yehuda ben Abraham v'Sarah v'et Friedel bat Rachel v'et Gutman Wolfben from Agutta v'et Mutuga Sarah bat Shenel Golda v'et Bela Esther Gittel bat Fega v'et Benzion ben Gittel Shaul, Viet Chaya bat Sarah, Viet Yaakov ben Abraham, Viet Yoel ben Ari ben Esther, Viet Eliyahu ben Shena Shira, Viet Yehudit bat Lib bat Sivia, Viet Yisrael ben Alfrieda, Viet Aharon Avram ben Adina, Viet Yosef ben Yeta, Viet Rivka bat Nachama, Viet Shmuel Mordechai ben Tova, Viet Eliyahu Chaim, Viet Neshama Rachel bat Sarah, Viet Chava bat Yaakov Sonia, Viet Yitzchak ben Leah, Viet Hillel ben Yaakov, Viet Silchana bat Sivia, Viet Alan Garay, Viet Ezra ben Yerachmiel Ufrida, Viet Job ben Flora, Viet Golda ben bat Fega, Viet Esther bat Liba, Viet Risachana bat Chasya Geula, Viet Avram Simcha ben Abraham ben Sarah, Viet Harav Eliezer ben Sion ben Chaya Golda, Viet Sarah Tserel ben bat Miriam, Viet Yisrael bat Korin, Viet Menachem ben Lili, Viet Pesach Yitzhak ben Yehudit, Viet Natan David ben Baruch, Umina, Viet Sylvia Kaufman, Viet Blake Estes, Viet Ogeni bat Esther, Viet Doron ben Ezra, Viet Sivia, Viet Liat Chaya bat Doron v'Mariasha Shena, Viet Ruth Freda bat Miral, Viet Yehuda Yisrael ben Leah, Viet David HaKohen ben Etel, Viet Shulamit bat Miriam, Viet Mariasha Shena bat Yaakov Yisrael, Viet Taiba, Viet Chaim Raful ben Sipora, Viet Luz bat Sarah, Viet Maurice Zorman, Viet Viet kol hacholim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yimlei Rachamim Lehem Lachzikam L'Rapotam B'Shlach Lehem Meiraf V'Wash Le'Mam Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'Toch Shar HaCholim B'Chazek Et Yidei Oskim Bet Tzorcheihem Shabbat Yiblazog Refuah Krova Lavo Hashta Bagala Vizman Kariv V'Nomar Amen. We wish a full and speedy recovery to everyone who was included in this list and who is in our hearts. Fifth Aliyah.
He's listed as Jonathan Powell, Kenji. And Johnny, you can start with the bracha since you're a new reader, and then continue with the fifth aliyah, which can be found on page 332, chapter 4, verse 1. Jonathan Powell. I think Kenji's just trying to find you, or unmute you or something. There you go.
Okay. ויען משה ויאמר, והן לא יאמינו לי ולא ישמעו בקולי, כי יאמרו לא נראה לך אדוני, ויאמר אליו אדוני מה זה בידיך, ויאמר מטה. ויאמר השליחהו ארצה, והשליחהו ארצה, ויהיה לנחש, ונס משה מפניו. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, שלח ידך ואחוז בזנבו, וישלח ידו ויחזק בו, ויהי למטה בכפו. למען יאמינו כי נראה אליך אדוני אלוהי אבותם, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב.
Sixth aliyah.
ויאמר אדוני לא עוד, הבנה ידך בחיקך והלווה ידו בחיקו ויוציאה, והנה ידו מצורעת כשלג. ויאמר השב ידך אל חיקך, וישב ידו אל חיקו, ויוציאה מחיקו, והנה שבה כבשרו. והיה אם לא יאמינו לך, ולא ישמעו לכל האות הראשון, והאמינו לכל האות האחרון. והיה אם לא יאמינו גם לשני האותות האלה, ולא ישמעו לקולך, ולקחת ממימי היאור, ושפכת ביבשה, והיו המים אשר תיקח מן היאור, והיו לדם ביבשת.
Seventh aliyah, verse 10.
ויאמר משה אל אדוני, בי אדוני לא איש דברים אנוכי, גם מתמול גם משלשום, גם מאז דברך אל עבדיך, כי כבד פה וכבד לשון אנוכי. ויאמר אדוני אליו, מי שם פה לאדם, או מי אסום אילם, או חרש, או פיקח, או עיוור, הלא אנוכי אדוני, ואתה לך, ואנוכי אהיה עם פיך, והראתיך אשר תדבר. ויאמר, בי אדוני שלח נא, בי תשלח, ויחרף אדוני במשה. ויאמר, הלא אהרון אחיך הלוי, ידעתי, כי דבר ידבר הוא, וגם הנה הוא יוצא לקראתך, ורעך ושמח בליבו, ודיברת אליו, ושמת את הדברים בפיו. אנוכי אהיה עם פיך ועם פיהו, הוריתי אתכם את אשר תעשון, ודיבר הוא לך אל העם, והיה הוא יהיה לך לפה, ואתה תהיה לו לאלוהים, ואת המטה הזה תיקח בידיך, אשר תעשה בו את האותות.
Yasher Koach, Johnny, it's so nice to see you and hear your voice laning for us this morning, so thank you for being with us. And we will continue now with the Haftorah. Right, Rabbi Kligfeld, you don't have anything to say before? Great. Haftorah, Isaac Budai will be reading for us and leading. And you can find that on page 343 in your Eitz Chaim. I'm just waiting to see Isaac. Wonderful. And if you're not in Eitz Chaim, it's Isaiah 27, verse 6 is where we begin. You're good to go, Isaac.
Abayim Yashresh Yaakov Yatziz Uparach Yisrael Umal'u Pnei Tevel Tenuva Hak Makat Makehu Hikahu Im Kehereg Harugav Horag Besas'a Beshalcha Terivena Haga ברוחו הקשה ביום קדים, לכן בזאת יכופר עוון יעקב, וזה כל פרי עשית חטאתו, ושומו כל אבני מזבח, כאבני קיר מנופצות, לא יקומו אשרים וחמנים, כי עיר בצורה בדר, נווה משולח ונעזב במדבר, שם יראה עגל ושם ירבץ וכילם צעפיה, יבוש כצירה תשברנה נשים באות מאירות אותה, כי לא אמבינות הוא, על כן לא ירחמנו עושהו, ויוצרו לו יחוננו. והיה ביום ההוא יכפות אדוני משבולת הנהר עד נחל מצרים, ואתם תלוקטו לאחר אחד בני ישראל. והיה ביום ההוא ייתקע בשופר גדול, ובאו העובדים בארץ אשור, והנידחים בארץ מצרים, והשתחוו לאדוני בהר הקודש בירושלים. עטרת גאות שיכורי אפרים, וציץ נובל צבי תפארתו, אשר על ראש גיא שמנים הלומי יין. הנה חזק ואמיץ לאדוני, כזרם ברד, שער כתב, כזרם מים כבירים שופטים, הניח לארץ ביד, רגליים תרמסנה, עטרת גאות שיכורי אפרים. והייתה ציצת נובל צבי תפארתו, אשר על ראש גיא שמנים, כביקורה בטרם קיץ, אשר יראה הרואה אותם בעודה בכפו, יבלנה ביום ההוא. יהיה אדוני צבאות לעטרת צבי ולצפירת תפארה לשאר עמו ולרוח משפט ליושב על המשפט ולגבורה משיבי מלחמה שרה וגם אלה ביין שגו ובשחר טעו כהן ונביא שגו בשחר נבלעו מן היין טעו מן השחר שגו ורואה פקו פליליה כי כל שולחנות מלאו קיצוה בלי מקום את מי יורדיה ואת מי יבין שמועה גמולי מחלב עתיקי משדיים כי צב לצב צב לצב קו לקו קו לקו זער שם זער שם כי בלגי שפה ובלשון אחרת ידבר על העם הזה אשר אמר עליהם זאת המנוחה הניפו ליעף וזאת המרגע ולא אהבו שמוע והיה להם דבר אדוני צב לצב צב לצב קו לקו קו לקו זער שם זער שם למען ילכו וכשלו אחור ונשברו ונוקשו ונלכדו לכן כה אמר אדוני אל בית יעקב אשר פדה את אברהם לא אתה יבוש יעקב ולא איתה פניו יחברו כי בריאותו ילדיו מעשה ידי בקרבו יקדישו שמי והקדישו את קדוש יעקב ואת אלוהי ישראל יריצו.
Yasher Koach, Isaac, thank you for a beautiful Haftorah. And now I'll turn it back over to Rabbi Kligfeld.
Let's do this, Rabbi Schatz. Let's do the prayer for the new month, and then I'll share my words, and then we'll see where we are in terms of time. My guess is at that point we'll encourage people to do Musaf on their own and end with Kiddush. But let's definitely say a prayer for our country and a prayer for this new month. So first, a prayer for our country. In the Lev Shalem, we're going to turn to page 177. There are different prayers for the country in the different Sidurim. Today, we're going to say the prayer for the country along the side of the page of the Lev Shalem 177. Our God and God of our ancestors, grant to our country the will and wherewithal to fulfill its calling to justice, liberty, and equality. May each of us fill our responsibilities of citizenship with care, generosity, and gratitude, ever conscious of the extraordinary blessing of freedom, ever mindful of our duties to one another. Bless those who volunteer to labor on behalf of us all. May they find the strength and courage to complete their tasks and fulfill their dreams. May our judges, elected leaders, and all who hold public office exercise their responsibilities with wisdom, fairness, and justice for all. Fill them with love and kindness, and bless them that they may walk with integrity on the paths of peace and righteousness. Creator and protector of all, watch over our armed forces and all those entrusted with our safety, as they daily put their lives at risk to protect us and our freedoms. Be with them in times of danger, give them courage to act with honor and dignity, as well as insight to do what is right in your eyes. Fill us with all with the gifts of love and courage, that we may create a world that reflects your glory. May we each respond to the charge of your prophet. For what does Adonai demand of you, but to act justly, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? May the one who brings peace on high bring peace and prosperity to our world and keep us in safety. And let us say, Amen. Page 180. Would you like to do this, or would you like me to, Rabbi Schatz?
Why don't you, because I can't stand and be heard.
Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu. By the way, it's 180 or 150 or 418. שתחדש עלינו את החודש הזה לטובה ולברכה. שתחדש עלינו את החודש הבא לטובה ולברכה. ותיתן לנו חיים ארוכים, חיים של שלום, חיים של טובה, חיים של ברכה, חיים של פרנסה, חיים של חילוץ עצמות, חיים שיש בהם יראת שמיים ויראת חטא, חיים שאין בהם בושה וכלימה, חיים של אושר בכבוד. חיים שתהבנו אהבת תורה ויראת שמיים, חיים שימלאו משאלות ליבנו לטובה, אמן סלה. מישה עשה ניסים, מישה עשה ניסים לאבותינו, מישה עשה ניסים, מישה עשה ניסים לאבותינו, וגאל אותם מעבדות לחירות, ויגאל אותנו בקרוב יקבץ נידחינו מארבע כנפות הארץ. חברים כל ישראל, חברים כל ישראל, חברים כל ישראל ונאמר אמן. חברים כל ישראל, ראש חודש שבט יהיה ביום החמישי, הבא עלינו ועל כל ישראל לטובה. You should all repeat that. The Hebrew month of Shvat will begin this Wednesday night into Thursday. May it come to us and to the entire people of Israel only for good. יחדשהו הקדוש ברוך הוא עלינו ועל כל עמו בית ישראל לחיים ולשלום, לששון ולשמחה, לישועה ולנחמה, ונאמר אמן. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. As I mentioned before, this is a slightly elongated version and a changed version of the Shabbat video that I sent out yesterday. If you listen to that video, wonderful. Some of this will be familiar, although rewritten in different parts, and some of it is brand new. No matter what week one lives through, the Torah always finds a way to speak to it. And I say it that way with Torah as the subject of that phrase, rather than saying that we always find something in the Torah that is relevant, because I want to reinforce this sense of animating the Torah. An ageless sacred text, one endowed with divine sparks, a text that in our tradition almost itself has a will. So yes, I hear the Torah talking to us every week, especially this week. Today, we're ending a terrible and terribly important week. In a sense, it was a week in which democracy almost lost. But I also think it was a week in which democracy and America were ultimately victorious. We hit a nadir, but we climbed back towards an apex too. And I feel today both wounded but also hopeful. And again, the Torah is whispering to me. One could argue that the most significant verse in the book of Exodus, Shemot, which we just began reading today, is chapter 1, verse 8. We didn't actually read this particular verse in our reading today, but it's part of the parsha. Vayakom melech chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yada et Yosef. There arose a king over Egypt who didn't know Joseph. Because that verse sets the conditions for the Israelite oppression and thus for our eventual exodus and redemption and receiving of Torah. The verse begins the transition in Egypt from thriving to slavery, from a society working to a society utterly broken. And it begins with what the Midrash considers an almost intentional not knowing, a willful ignorance of reality. Come on. How could a sitting Pharaoh not have known Joseph and what he did for Egypt? It's impossible to fathom. It must be that this new king did indeed know, but pretended not to. Something we all do at times. Why might Pharaoh have done that? So that he has an instant pretense to demonize others, to change his decrees, to subjugate a people, and to wield authority with no bounds and no self-sacrifice, and certainly no care for others aside from himself and those that are his. Now, our versions of willful not knowing may not be as draconian in their impact, but we are guilty of it in our own way, to our and to others' detriment. I was struck by my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi David Ingber's noting the uncanny and timely resonance of our being reminded this week of the cost of not knowing, not acknowledging a Joseph then and now. Joseph, the son of Jacob, then. Joseph Biden, now. Not knowing and not acknowledging is different than not praising or not loving or not supporting or not cheering. Not knowing, refusing to know when it is willful, is the beginning of the end of a world that makes sense, where basic systems work. This past week's blight on our nation stems from many sources. We like to think things simply, but they are often complex. But at the core, the rage on the street leading from the White House to the Capitol, fomented by the President of the United States, stemmed from a portion of our population who refused to know, refused to acknowledge this generation's Joseph, who refused to know and accept what is eminently knowable, what is in fact known already. This rejection of knowledge is a Pharaoh-like stance, and our society cannot abide by it. Whether one thrills at the notion of a Biden presidency, and I know many of you do, or is wary of it for any number of reasons, and I know many of you are. All honorable Americans must yodea, must know and aver and accept this Joseph. That in and of itself does not bring peace to our polity, but it is needed, and it's an overdue start. Now that's Shemot. One could argue that the most significant verse in the book of Genesis, the book of Breshit, which we finished last week, is chapter 4, verse 9, in which Cain humanity's inaugural murderer, is set out as an archetype of the antithesis of everything good people should stand for. You know the scene. When questioned by God about where his brother Hevel, Abel, is, Cain says famously, Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's keeper? The Torah's silent but profound answer to that question is yes, of course. And society after society founded on biblical ethics have reinforced that moral stance, never accomplishing it perfectly, but always at least reaching for it aspirationally. Yes, we are responsible for others. No, we cannot shirk responsibility for when we do what is wrong to others. No, we cannot turn away from our duty to ensure that our world is filled with what is right. Our world, our nation, both our Jewish nation and our American nation, are filled with many who are quite different and yet who share something essential. And I, for one, am optimistic that we are moving tentatively but confidently towards a society that revels in its multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-ideological pluribus, cohering into a workable and even admirable unum. It will not happen overnight, but it must start today. And we all play a part. And it starts with yedi'ah, with basic knowing, intimate knowing. And I'm optimistic that our jettisoning any affection for, or worse, fetish for, the core verse of the book of Exodus will bring us closer to inverting the core verse of the book of Genesis, so that we can look out our windows at all the others, those with whom we agree and those with whom we vehemently disagree, and say with a full heart, yes, I am responsible for you. Yes, I am claimed by you. Yes, I wish to build a world with you. An image became instantly iconic this week, even more so within the Jewish community and even more so within the shul-going, Torah-reading part of the Jewish community. It was of two women wearing masks. They were chamber assistants, essentially Senate aides, whose roles on that day would normally have been minuscule and perfunctory at best, but which this week's events have rendered gargantuan. The image is of them carrying a leather box filled with electoral votes. The story is apparently that these two young women had the presence of mind, and I would add the courage, to protect and keep safe, and in this picture, transport those electoral votes before fleeing the Senate, which is what they did next. Now, it would be hyperbole to suggest that had they not done what they did, our democracy would be dead. But it is more than resonant and accurate to say that these women, captured so resolutely in this image, helped midwife our democracy back to life. Parsha astute Jews could not help but think of Shifra and Puah, the two women midwives who defied tyranny and risked personal safety in order to keep babies alive, in order to make it possible that a nation would live. As the Torah reminds us, this parsha and nearly every parsha, and as our society incessantly reminds us, there are always villains that must be confronted. And there are always heroes too. Shabbat Shalom. Given the time and our general goal to complete these Zoom services in around 2 hours, we're going to announce pages for Musaf, which we wouldn't be doing as a minyan anyway. It would just be a quiet Amidah. We'll say Kiddush and then release you to daven Musaf on your own. It's page 185 in the Lev Shalem, page 156 in the Slim Shalom, page 430 in the Sim Shalom. We'll announce that tonight Mincha Mariv is at, do you remember Rabbi Schatz offhand?
I believe it's 4:40.
And Rabbi Chorny will be teaching.
Yes.
And then just keep reading your emails for what will be happening in our community over the next few days. And I hope I don't need to reinforce this, but I'm going to stay home, stay safe, stay away from people, even the people that you love. We are in a critical municipal emergency in addition to the national concerns that we are living through, and it requires everyone to be responsible for themselves and for one another. Stay home as much as possible, and if you need support in getting groceries or basics to you, there are plenty of ways to do that, and if you want direct support, reach out to anyone in the clergy, and we can help you do that. For now, please rise for Kiddush. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael Shabbat L'asar Shabbat L'dortam Berito Lam Beini Uvein b'nei Yisrael Tili Lam Ki Sheishim Masar Anai Shemayim V'Daretz V'yom HaShvi Shabbat V'yin HaPash L'chor Shom Shabbat L'Kadosho Sheishim Min Tavod V'Asitu Kol L'Atach V'yom HaShvi Shabbat L'Anai L'Mecha Lo Taseh Kol L'Cha Ata U'Mincha V'Techa Avdecha Malcha V'Techa V'Gercha Asher Sharecha Ki Sheishim Masar Anai Shemayim V'Daretz Et Hayam V'Yakol Asher Bam V'Yanach V'yom HaShvi Alkeim Be'Rach Anai Shom Shabbat V'Kadoshehu Savri Maranan Rabbanan Rabbatai
Chaim.
Baruch Atah Mecholam Borei Peri Hagafen. Good Shabbos, everyone. See you soon. Enjoy your Musaf. And great to spend this morning with you.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Eshar koach to everyone who participated.